My name is Elena, and 3 years ago, I married Logan, convinced we were on the same page about our future. We found a gorgeous apartment at the Pinnacle, a high-rise building right in the heart of the city. The view was incredible, and I loved spending my evenings by the window, watching the sunset paint the skyline in golden hues. I was climbing the corporate ladder quickly, heading the finance department at a media production company. My career was demanding, requiring long hours and unwavering dedication to secure a bright future for both of us. But my focus on work started to create cracks in our home life. "Elena, you're never home," Logan complained one night as I walked in close to 10 p.m. "What's the point of this amazing apartment if you can't enjoy it?" Exhausted, I set down my briefcase. "Logan, we've been over this. My career is important, not just for me, but for us. It's what allows us to live like this." Before he could bring up his mother's opinions again, I quickly added, "I'm not interested in fitting into the mold your mother has for me." Logan's face fell. "Maybe you should care. She's family." "And so am I," I retorted. "You knew my priorities when we married. Career first, then family." That night, as I lay awake, I felt the distance between us growing, fueled by his mother's influence. But I was determined to push forward. I had come too far to turn back now. The next day, my boss, Mr. Arthur, called me into his office with exciting news. "Elena, we're merging with a major company from another city, and I want you to lead the new department." My heart leaped at the opportunity. "That's fantastic, Mr. Arthur. I appreciate your confidence in me," he cautioned. "This role will be demanding. Can you fully commit?" Without hesitation, I assured him, "Absolutely, sir. I'm ready for this challenge." Eager to share the good news with Logan, I stopped by our favorite restaurant to plan a celebratory dinner. I meticulously set the table with our finest china, lit candles, and waited for him to arrive. But when he walked in, his mood was noticeably sour. "What's all this?" he asked, eyeing the setup with suspicion. My excitement bubbled over. "I'm up for a major promotion. This could mean a new house, global travel, endless possibilities." He cut me off, his tone icy. "I see, and more hours at work. When will we become a priority?" "I am prioritizing us," I insisted. "This is for our future." He scoffed. "What future?" "You're never here. This apartment is always a mess. I'm fed up with takeout." Without another word, Logan retreated to his office and slammed the door. I sat alone, the meal before me growing cold, the apartment's luxury overshadowed by the tension. 3 weeks after hiring a housekeeper, I noticed a remarkable change. Our home was immaculate. This small adjustment seemed a trivial sacrifice for the sake of my career advancement, and hopefully, a step towards mending our strained relationship. We started to enjoy the perks of having a housekeeper, with delicious dinners ready each evening. But this change didn't seem to soften Logan's growing discontent. "Found a way to replace yourself at home, too," he quipped bitterly as we sat for dinner one night. I kept my voice light, hoping to ease the tension. "I thought it would help us both, keeping the apartment tidy and ensuring we have nice meals to come home to." "But that's not the problem, is it, Elena?" Logan interrupted, his voice rising as he slammed his fork down. "What's next? Finding someone to replace you in other parts of our life?" His words felt like a physical blow. "That's uncalled for," I replied quietly, shocked by his harshness. "Uncalled for? Let's talk about what's uncalled for." Logan stood, his chair scraping back violently. "It's uncalled for to always come back to an empty house. It's uncalled for to have a wife more committed to her job than her family." He stormed out, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heavy heart. In the following weeks, our home was filled with cold silences and sharp exchanges, making every interaction a minefield. My focus on work, driven by the ambition for that promotion, meant I was barely aware of the deepening rift between us. Determined to break the cycle, I seized a rare day off as an opportunity for reconciliation. I sent Logan a message filled with hope. "Planning a romantic dinner tonight, complete with your favorite dessert. He read it but didn't respond. I interpreted his silence as consent and went ahead with the preparations. I decorated the dining table with candles, selected a fine wine, dressed in my best outfit, and waited eagerly for him. My anticipation turned to dismay when Logan walked in, not alone, but with his mother, Addison, in tow. "Oh, Elena, what a surprise," Addison said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "Were you expecting company?" I forced a smile. "I wanted to surprise Logan with a nice dinner. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "Well, I hope there's enough for 3, Addison said, making herself comfortable at the table set for 2. Logan avoided my gaze, taking a seat silently. I suppressed my frustration and fetched an extra place setting. My plans for a romantic evening shattered. Addison dominated the dinner conversation, throwing in subtle digs. "You know, my friend Sarah just became a grandmother. It's such a blessing to have little ones around," she remarked, eyeing me pointedly. I took a deep gulp of wine, replying curtly, "That sounds wonderful." She continued, "Naturally, you need to be around to raise them. A woman's primary role is towards her family, after all." I tightened my grip on my fork, my temper flaring. "Actually, Addison, a woman's role is whatever she chooses it to be." Her eyes narrowed. "Really? And what about your roles as a wife and potential mother to my grandchildren?" Standing abruptly, my chair screeching back, I reached my breaking point. "I think it's time for you to leave, Addison." "Elena?" Logan started, attempting to intervene, but I was resolute. "No, Logan, I can't do this anymore. This is my home." Addison rose to her full height, indignation coloring her features. "Well, I never. Logan, are you going to allow her to speak to me this way?" After they left, I poured myself another glass of wine and collapsed onto the couch, the evening's dreams dissolving around me. In my elegant dress, amid the dwindling candlelight and untouched food, I pondered a distressing thought. Was this the beginning of our unraveling? The following morning brought an empty house. A note on the kitchen counter revealed that Logan had gone to stay with his mother to clear his head. My hands trembled as I crumpled the note, tossing it away, a whirlwind of anger and sorrow swirling within me. Days turned into weeks with Logan away, and upon his return, the distance between us had only grown. We navigated around each other like 4 strangers, exchanging minimal words. I reassured myself that we just needed time to adjust, but deep down, unease gnawed at me. Then, one evening after a grueling day of meetings, I returned home to a startling scene. A floral, cloying scent wafted through the air as I opened the door, and there in our living room was Addison, in a bathrobe and slippers, looking unsettlingly at ease. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my eyes darting between Addison and Logan, who sat on the couch with a look of discomfort. Addison's smile was tight, unconvincing. "Oh, Elena, how nice it is that you joined us. We were just discussing dinner plans." "Dinner plans?" My voice climbed in pitch. "And why are you dressed like you live here?" Logan inhaled deeply, his next words hitting me like a ton of bricks. "Mom's going to be staying with us for a while. I'm tired of being alone all the time. And since you're hardly ever here..." I was speechless. "You invited your mother to live with us without discussing it with me?" "If you were ever home, maybe we could have talked about it," Logan retorted sharply. I turned to Addison, who wore a smug look as she observed our confrontation. "This is my home. You can't just move in here." Addison's expression hardened. "Your home? This is my son's home too, and if he wants me here, then here I'll stay." "Get out," I said, my voice low and menacing. Logan stepped in front of me. "If you don't like it, Elena, you can leave." I was aghast. "Excuse me? This is my apartment. I bought it before we were even married." "Now it's our apartment," Logan declared, "and I'm telling you, if you can't accept my mother being here, then you can get out." Stunned into silence, I stared at the man before me. This was not the Logan I married. He was a stranger, echoing his mother's sentiments. Addison advanced towards me with a threatening look. "You heard him, dear. If you don't like the new arrangement, there's the door." I instinctively stepped back, my hand reaching for my phone. "If you touch me, I'm calling the police." Addison's face shifted to shock, then she theatrically clutched her chest, sinking back onto the couch as tears streamed down her face. "Oh, how you've hardened her heart. That awful job to think she'd threaten her own family." Logan rushed to comfort his mother, casting me a venomous glance. Without another word, I turned and walked to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. The next morning, as I lay awake, my phone rang. It was Mr. Arthur, my boss. "I need you on a plane today," he said briskly. "The merger is at a critical point." The call had come early, at 7 a.m., informing me that my presence was crucial to oversee the financial aspects of our merger. "Of course, Mr. Arthur, I'll be there," I assured him. As I glanced around the still silent house, assuming Logan and Addison were asleep, I quickly packed a suitcase. Just as I finished, Logan appeared in the doorway, his expression icy. "Going somewhere?" he asked. I stood up straight, meeting his cold gaze. "Yes, I have to go on a business trip for the merger. I'll be back soon, and we can talk then." "Okay." As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, Addison's eyes followed me from the living room, her smile smug. I paused at the door, turning back to Logan. "I'm leaving now. I'll text you when I land." His response was curt and chilling. "Don't bother coming back." His words felt like a blow, but I managed to hide my pain. Silently, I walked out, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing like a somber gong. The business trip was intense, a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and late nights spent poring over financial documents. It was a welcome distraction from the turmoil at home. Each night, I sent Logan a text to let him know I was okay, but each went unanswered. After 9 days, I returned, my heart pounding as the taxi pulled up to my building. Approaching my apartment, something was off. My key didn't fit in the lock. Confused, I knocked. The door swung open, revealing Logan and Addison, casually dressed as if nothing was amiss. "Logan," I said, my voice laced with confusion. "Why doesn't my key work?" Logan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. "Because I changed the locks." I felt as if I'd stepped into a nightmare. "This is insane, Logan. You can't do this. This is my home." His expression was stone cold. "Not anymore. You have a choice to make, Elena. Right here, right now. Your career or your home and marriage." I couldn't believe the transformation in him. This was not the Logan I married, but a stranger twisted by his mother's toxic influence. "You can't be serious," I whispered, barely able to accept the reality before me. Logan pulled out a stack of papers, divorce papers. "Dead serious. Sign these and you can go back to your job. Tear them up and you can come back inside as a proper wife should." I looked from the papers to Logan, then to Addison. At that moment, the clarity of my future crystallized. A life of resentment, of being controlled, of sacrificing everything I'd worked for. Without a word, I took the papers and signed my name on every dotted line. "There," I said, handing them back to him. "I chose my career because clearly I don't have a husband or a family anymore." Their faces registered shock, almost comical in their disbelief. Before they could respond, I turned on my heel and walked away, my suitcase trailing behind me. As I stood in the elevator watching the numbers descend, a laugh bubbled up from deep within me. I had been ousted from my own home, and in doing so, I had divorced a man who no longer recognized me as his equal. Within 10 minutes, I found myself without a home. That evening, as I sat alone in a hotel room, my thoughts were in turmoil, reflecting on the tumultuous events of the day. The following morning, I rose early and made a call to my friend Lena, a lawyer I had known since our college days. "Elena, what's wrong? You never call this early." Lena's voice rang with concern over the phone. I spent the next hour detailing the entire ordeal to her. After I finished, there was a brief silence from her end before she finally spoke, her tone steady and reassuring. "Elena, the apartment you bought. It was before your marriage," she inquired. "Yes," I replied. "In that case," she explained, "it's usually regarded as separate property, not marital property. It shouldn't be divided in the divorce. Relief swept through me. Newly energized, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor, focusing on the major merger at my job. Despite the long hours, which often saw me sleeping on my office couch instead of returning to the hotel, I pressed on. A few days later, Maria, a realtor and another longtime friend, called me. Her voice was laden with worry. "Elena, honey, are you all right? I just saw Logan's posts online. He's saying quite unpleasant things about you." "What kind of things?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Maria hesitated, then said, "He's labeling you a heartless career woman and is talking about suing for alimony and trying to claim the apartment in the divorce." I laughed bitterly. Let him try. The apartment is mine, and he knows it. After ending the call with Maria, I sat at my desk, my thoughts racing. Logan was attempting to tarnish my reputation, portraying me as the villain in our saga. I couldn't let him succeed. Picking up the phone, I dialed Mr. Arthur's number. After I outlined the situation to him, he responded with a supportive tone. "Elena," he said, "your personal life won't impact your job here. You're a valued employee. Don't let this situation affect your performance." I thanked him, grateful for his support. "Mr. Arthur suggested taking some time off to handle my personal issues, especially since the merger was nearing completion." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that," I replied. That evening, as I was about to leave the office, I noticed a notification on my phone. Logan had started a live broadcast from what used to be our shared apartment, now clearly mine. Against my better judgment, I watched as he and a film crew discussed extensive renovations. An idea suddenly sparked in my mind, and I called Maria with a mischievous plan. "Maria, it's Elena. How quickly can you sell an apartment?" I asked her. Laughter filled the phone. "For you, Elena, I can work wonders. What's the plan?" As I outlined my thoughts, Maria responded with excited gasps and chuckles. "Oh, this is going to be brilliant," she exclaimed. "I already know a couple who's been searching for just this kind of place. They're very discreet. They assured me the deal could be closed in just 3 weeks, maybe even less." After the call, I reclined in my chair, a playful smile forming as I thought about Logan's misguided confidence. He thought he was in control, but he was about to be surprised. The next 3 weeks flew by in a blur of tireless work. By day, I wrapped up the merger, and by night, I handled the paperwork, coordinated with Maria, and watched Logan's boastful social media updates about his renovation plans. When the pivotal day finally arrived, I donned my best suit and took a moment over my morning coffee, preparing for the events that would unfold. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria popped up. "It's done. Paperwork signed, money transferred, new owners on their way. Good luck." A wave of satisfaction swept over me. It was time. I tried to focus on work at the office, but my thoughts kept wandering to the imminent drama. Around midday, Lena texted me. "The TV crew and Logan's mom are there. He's looking very pleased with himself. The show's starting." For the next hour, I struggled to concentrate, my eyes constantly flicking to my phone. Finally, Lena's text came through. "You won't believe this. New owners just arrived." Logan's stunned. "The crew is freaking out. This is epic." I couldn't contain my laughter, earning puzzled looks from my colleagues. I excused myself and retreated to the bathroom, allowing myself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Returning to my desk, I found an email from Lena containing a video link. With trembling hands, I clicked it. The video opened with Logan in the center of what used to be our apartment, now just mine, grandly discussing his plans while his mother hovered smugly in the background. Suddenly, a commotion off-camera drew everyone's attention. The camera swung to capture a well-dressed couple entering, followed by Maria holding documents. "Excuse me," the man said politely, yet assertively. "But I believe you're in our apartment." Logan's face morphed from confusion to annoyance. "Your apartment? This is my home," he blustered. Maria stepped forward, her professional demeanor intact. "Actually, Mr. Anderson, this apartment now legally belongs to my clients. The sale was finalized this morning." The camera captured Logan's shock as he processed the reality. from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. Sale? What sale? Elena couldn't have sold this apartment without my permission. Actually, Maria replied, her smile unwavering, she could, and she did. The apartment was in her name, purchased before your marriage. She had every right to sell it. The scene dissolved into chaos, Logan yelling, his mother dramatically wailing, and the TV crew debating the use of the footage. The video ended with Logan and his mother being escorted out by security, the TV crew eagerly following, sensing they had stumbled upon a spectacular show. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from Mr. Arthur. My office now. As I entered his office, bracing for the worst, I was surprised to find him smiling. Elena, sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair. I've seen the video. It's all over social media. My face flushed with embarrassment, unsure of what was to come. Sir, I apologize for the unintended publicity the situation has caused, I said, feeling mortified that my personal life had spilled over into public view. To my surprise, Mr. Arthur chuckled in response. Elena, you've just demonstrated exactly why you're the ideal candidate to lead our new department. You're clever and resourceful, and you've shown you can turn a difficult situation to your advantage, precisely what we need for this merger. His words brought a smile to my face. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your support. Now, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious note, I think it's time you took that week off we discussed. Settle your matters, find yourself a new place, and when you return, we'll finalize your promotion and start you in your new role. During the following week, I dedicated myself to finding a new home, eager for a fresh beginning somewhere that held no memories of Logan or our dissolved marriage. With the proceeds from the sale of the old apartment, I had a broad array of options. In my search, I discovered an ideal little house on the city's outskirts, near our newly merged company's headquarters. It was charming, with a beautiful garden and a picturesque mountain view, a serene escape from past turmoil. I made an offer immediately, and it was quickly accepted. The day I moved in, Lena and Maria came over to help. We unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, filling the house with laughter and light-hearted chatter, letting the stress of recent weeks dissolve. As evening fell, standing in the garden with a glass of wine, I felt a profound peace wash over me as I gazed at the mountains. It was a relief to feel grounded again. When I returned to work the next week, ready to embrace my new responsibilities, I sensed the curious gazes and heard the whispers as I walked through the office. I kept my head high, determined not to be shaken. Mr. Arthur welcomed me at my new office, a prime corner spot with a splendid city view. Ready to get started? He asked, smiling. More than ready, sir, I responded, feeling a surge of excitement. Settling into my new role, I immersed myself in the complexities of the merger, reveling in the challenges that required long hours and deep concentration. I loved every moment, realizing this was what I had worked and sacrificed so much for. One evening, while working late, my phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Logan, pleading for reconciliation. I paused, considering the message, then deleted it without a reply. That chapter of my life was definitively closed. Now I was writing a new story, one where I held the pen. Story 2. This is my name, and not in the way you may think. I'm not the stereotypical high-level CEO who walks about wearing expensive shoes, although my father is a prominent figure in the business world, with a company so massive it almost has its zip code. I've also always felt more at ease in a basic cubicle than in an opulent corner office, even with my expensive degree. My family isn't delighted about it. They envisioned a new route for me. The brightest member of the family, my brother Leon, is being prepared to inherit our father's business empire. While I've made it obvious that the corporate monarchy is not my destiny, the stress and drama of leadership are things I'd prefer stay away from. Canon comes next. Consider this. I'm not attempting to unwind with buddies at a dilapidated tavern. When Canon walks in, tray in hand, and a smile that freezes you in your tracks. Even though he works as a server, there's something refreshingly real about him. His attitude on life and his simplicity were refreshing. After we struck up a conversation, it was obvious that we clicked. Our interests, activities, and opinions fit well. My folks couldn't contain their laughter when they found out about Cannon. As though I had brought a creature from another planet home, they would laugh and call me a waiter. To them, he was only a passing fancy. But that was serious to me. He's real. He knows me. I would dispute, annoyed by their limited perspectives. My dad was also not happy, critiquing my decision to play house with a drink-serving lad. Cannon, however, was distinct. He had little interest in pursuing wealth or prestige. He was all about living life to the fullest. It is precisely what I desired. I told my parents I loved him and held my ground. He is not involved in any of this, pointing to the high standards that dominated our household. I knew better than to believe it was a passing phase. Cannon made the proposal in his usual direct way. No theatrical gestures. Just be honest and get married to me. And after a time, everything made sense. Indeed. Come on, let's do it. I found myself declaring that I was prepared to commit to the man who had won my heart at the marriage meeting, even if he could have made a livelihood serving drinks. A whirlwind occurred. We made the decision to be married before we had even brought him home. Although that may sound impetuous, it felt appropriate. Just going forward as a team. Don't turn around. Only members of the immediate family attended the little wedding. At a ceremony that likely cost less than one of his usual business lunches, my father, a giant of industry, watched in bewilderment as his daughter married a server. However, I thought it was ideal, straightforward, sincere, and true to who we are. Here's the reality, though. My dad showed up when it counted, even though it seemed like he would have rather to be somewhere else throughout the ceremony. With his usual roughness, he drew me aside after the ceremony. Although it wasn't the warm embrace I had hoped for, his congratulations were nevertheless significant. So there we were. Against all odds, Cannon and I got married. Our partnership, a little revolt based on love, and a sprinkling of defiance. Our small flat rapidly highlighted the reality of everyday existence. The room seemed cozy and comfortable to me, but for Cannon, it was a startling turn. I made an effort to learn his actual feelings about our new living situation one evening as we made our way around our little kitchen. So, you're actually comfortable here? You mean it's a little different from what you expected? Cannon hesitated, his effort at a grin failing to conceal his hesitancy. Yes. It fits snugly. A palace was not what I expected. But this. Everything is all right. He said, it's got character. But his words seemed to be weighed down by more unsaid ideas. Early on, tensions arose over household duties. Cannon's unwillingness to help out around the house became a common source of annoyance. He didn't have too much work. He had lots of spare time thanks to his part-time work. Cannon, the dishes are accumulating. Could you lend a hand a little? One night, with a hint of exhaustion in my voice, I inquired, come on, you know that I'm really into this stuff. Is it not possible for us to just order takeout? His formerly endearing smile was fading as he answered. The subject of professional advancement, or my willful evasion of it, started to come up often. My decision to remain in a non-leadership position in my father's business was incomprehensible to Cannon. You must consider the future, darling. When do you intend to take over at work? There's so much promise for you there. His irritation growing, he pressed. I sighed. Was the exchange too familiar? We've discussed it, Cannon. Right here, I'm content. I don't need a title to find fulfillment. But Cannon persevered. That's it. And the pleasure and the crown might be yours. The big picture is not visible to you. His patience diminishing. Our talks grew more strained, and one particularly harsh exchange left a lasting scar on our relationship. Understand that I'm not driven by the same things as you. I don't measure my worth by a job title or a fat paycheck. I made an effort to clarify. I'm trying to comprehend. Cannon's expression was one of exasperation and incredulity. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And you're sitting on a gold mine of potential, and you're too blind to see it. His remarks were sharp and cutting as he shouted them out. Is that what you think of me? That I am blind? Ignorant. I shot back. I could hear the agony in my voice. No, and you could do so much more in my opinion. With a milder tone, Cannon answered, but the damage was already done. Our once tranquil house became a battlefield of expectations and ideals. It seemed as though the guy I had married, who had previously shared my aspirations for simplicity and real connection, had vanished, to be replaced by someone I barely knew. The days were exhausting and long, and I found myself wishing I could just kick off my shoes and fall onto the couch to get away from the growing distance between us. However, it seems like the cosmos had a surprise in store for me. As soon as I went into our apartment, my heart fell. There was water all around. Our little living area was transformed into a temporary pool by the upstairs neighbors, who somehow managed to turn their indoor plumbing accident into an impromptu water feature. With a big sigh, I contacted my parents. As I described the damp catastrophe at hand, my voice was tremulous. After a tense moment, a quiet that seemed thick with unsaid words, my dad's voice eventually got through. Warmer and softer than normal. Of course, you both can stay here. We would welcome you. I could practically see the hesitant smile in his tone. It was a relief, definitely, but it also heralded the beginning of an unpleasant chapter. I didn't envision my married life with Cannon beginning with me living with my parents as a newlywed. But it was the new world we were going to experience. Although having a roof over our heads was reassuring, there was a great deal of concern about how this short-term arrangement may impact our relationship. The grandeur and atmosphere of my parents' estate were quite different from our modest flat. I pondered what may happen to our future together, and how Cannon would adjust to this new luxury. As my head whirled with these ideas, I started preparing for what I believed would be a brief visit. Cannon wasn't convinced. "The home of your parents, that's our best choice," he moaned as we mixed incredulity and frustration with his tone. "Yes, really? Unless you have a fancy condo hidden away," I answered, attempting to make things more humorous. He didn't answer, just silently carried on packing. His views on pride and independence were seldom hidden. As soon as we entered the home, I sensed Cannon's become rigid. I had never been really impacted by the luxury of my childhood home. However, it appeared to Cannon that we had arrived on another world. "Whoa, simply amazing," Cannon whispered, his customary assurance ebbing a little with every stride. To my surprise, my dad made the initial move to start a conversation. "Greetings." His smile was more official than kind as he replied, "Make yourselves at home." In exchange, Cannon forced a tight-lipped grin. The initial days were awkward and rigid. As I attempted to handle the abrupt change in our dynamic, Cannon appeared disoriented and wandered the hallways like a tourist. "When will I receive the big tour of the family business?" Cannon's irritation finally came out one evening over dinner. He quipped, "Maybe find me a little corner office." Everyone could sense the underlying tension, but my dad in particular almost choked on his drink before laughing it off and answering the company's son. "It needs more than ambition. It requires the proper background and years of training," he said sharply. His remarks were kind yet firmly dismissive. Cannon's face flushed deeply, showing a mixture of shame and annoyance. "Correct? Naturally." He pushed his food around his plate and murmured, "Silly me." Later. In the seclusion of our makeshift chamber, Cannon's annoyance erupted. Is he real? The appropriate backdrop. What's that intended to mean? He paced back and forth in rage. In an attempt to quiet the storm, Cannon, I perched on the edge of the bed. "My dad is, you know." "I didn't start," he said. Cannon interrupted me, though. "Didn't want to imply that I'm inadequate, since that's precisely how it sounded. I've never felt the gap between my world and his so wide," he added, his rage rising. And as I watched him pace, I knew exactly how much we'd have to overcome to bridge it. It wasn't just about living up to expectations. It has to do with handling his distinct style. "Keep going. We have not yet reached the finish. We'll manage." I grabbed for his hand and calmed him, trying to reduce the obvious stress. His rage gave way to a deeper, more sensitive hurt as he slowly withdrew. "You see, it's incredibly hard. Even when I'm right here with you, I constantly feel alienated." He admitted it. Our unfinished talk reflected the widening gap between our two worlds. Cannon found it difficult to deal with my family's unspoken expectations and the unsolved problems that threatened to separate us. In our flat, everything seemed unstable and erratic, like a delicate mixture. For a minute, life seemed to find its flow again. That's what I believed anyhow. But as the weeks turned into months, Cannon's presence diminished, his absences lengthened, and our house started to seem more like a deserted place, littered with the ruins of his hectic mornings and late evenings, strewn with soiled clothes, discarded dishes, and the reverberating quiet of conversations lost. He always gave the same response when I asked him a question. Works. Overwhelming. It's like that. However, I sensed that he was being held back by something more. I've never felt more alone. I went out to Ryden, an old family friend and head of security at my dad's workplace. Ryden was like an uncle to me, always willing to help out or give advice. I'm concerned about Cannon. Ryden, could you keep an eye on him for a while? There seems to be a problem, I inquired in a worried-sounding voice. I'm here for you. You know that. Ryden told me it was taken care of. His voice was somber but reassuring. Devastating revelations quickly emerged from the Ryden probe. Not all of Cannon's time was spent at work. There was an affair involving him. The lady, a fixture of affluence, often spotted around Cannon at his office, epitomized the grandeur I had always kept away of. All of it was bitterly ironic. My modest lifestyle used to make Cannon happy, but now he was captivated by someone whose life exuded a luxury that I had shunned, armed with indisputable proof. I saw the pictures and approached Cannon. His facade fell away, revealing defiance and contempt. So what? Indeed, she is beautiful and driven at a young age. You are not everything, he shot back sharply. His words hit me like a poisonous kick. The gradual, numbing realization that the man I once loved, the man I married, was now a stranger contrasted sharply with the sudden, acute pain. I'd like a divorce. With bitterness in my mouth, I said the words clearly. It was a categorical declaration rather than a query or an appeal. A silent nod of resignation took the place of the Cannon's derisive laughter. Fine, he agreed simply. Our marriage was over in an instant. The divorce process was characterized by silent meals and signatures. We were all deep in our serious thoughts. Cannon left after everything was settled, taking the last traces of our common life and leaving a profound emptiness rife with grief and treachery. My parents' response when I told them about the divorce was more relief than sadness. What you saw in him was never clear to us. After my marriage, my father, hardly hiding his relief, confessed. It was done. But I knew in my heart that they were correct. My distance from Cannon had become too great. By the end, the fact became painfully obvious. Unrelenting, Cannon continued to return under different aliases while reciting the same worn-out lines. I realized then that it was time for a historical reenactment. I went out to Ryden, our head of security. It's time for another show, Ryden. Are you able to monitor Cannon? He seems to be all talk and no substance, in my opinion. Ryden accepted right away, without hesitation. The report he later gave me was instructive and humorous. Cannon, living the good life, more like a grandiose facade. He led an ostentatiously lavish lifestyle, but it was all smoke and mirrors. The fancy automobiles were hired, and the costly holidays were charged to his new wife's time. As I read the article, I couldn't help but notice that Chuckle Cannon was still pursuing the glitzy and shallow, thinking it was treasure. Turning the pages, each one affirmed that it was the proper thing to do to leave him. The Cannon I thought I knew was nothing more than an illusion, and I was done roaming in that mirage. I sat back, putting the news about Cannon's lavish life aside, and smiled. Not because he failed, but because I was in control of my story and knew exactly where I was going. Weeks later, at a networking event, vital to my function as a CEO, I noticed Cannon. There he was, arm in arm with his new wife, playing the part of a guy who had gone on to apparently greater things. He never shied away from boasting. He pushed his wife as they went by and pointed at me loudly enough for me to hear. Over there is my ex-wife. She never really made much of herself. The sound of his wife's laughter reverberated forcefully around the room. It was painful, but only briefly. I was going to leave the conversation behind when an older guy arrived, his face flushed with fury. "Young man, how dare you speak of?" And in such fashion, he yelled, attracting the attention of guests in the vicinity. "Are you aware of her identity?" She is the very successful CEO of her father's business, and maybe one of our investors." Cannon's smile vanished, and his self-assured face gave way to one of shock. He tried to talk, but his words were incoherent. His wife, earlier pleased, suddenly looks horrified, absorbing her father's rebuke. Seizing the moment, I decided to deepen Cannon's embarrassment. "When we had our issues, he wasn't only seeing you, you know," I quietly told her. "There were others, and it seems his old tendencies remain." I took out my phone and showed her a picture that Ryden had taken of Cannon, holding hands with a lady who was obviously not his wife. She reacted instantly. Her face broke down into a mixture of anger and pain. "You're telling lies!" she screamed at me, but her concerns were validated by a look at Cannon's face. What ensued was tumultuous, a whirlwind of yelling and accusations as he raced to pacify his upset wife. He created the spectacle that was taking place, and as I left the event, I could feel the burden of that chapter closing in on me. I noticed myself smiling as I cautiously studied the attendees tried not to gawk too overtly. I turned on my heel and left, thinking about how Cannon's life was falling apart. While I found no pleasure in his distress, there was an evident feeling of poetic justice in observing karma develop since our previous encounter. I had changed, growing stronger and more accomplished than Cannon could have ever imagined. After the event, Cannon's reputation took a nosedive. His wife, having had enough of his infidelities, dissolved their marriage. His opulent lifestyle, which he had formerly boasted about, came to an abrupt end when his father-in-law took back the expensive vehicle and apartment. Cannon was so proud of his high society, friends disappeared faster than a wisp of smoke, leaving him isolated and struggling. The last I heard, he was back to waiting tables, buried under a mountain of debt accumulated from maintaining a facade of prosperity. Looking back, I remembered how Cannon had made fun of my modest way of life and goals. In sharp contrast to his previous haughtiness, he was now the one working hard to make ends meet. Even though I had nothing bad to say about him, I felt that this was a necessary reckoning. Amidst this tumult, something extraordinary happened. I met someone new. He should be called Jack. Jack is the antithesis of Cannon, grounded, unpretentious, and cherishes authenticity, hard effort, and real laughter over a simple cup of coffee. Without any pretenses, Jack and I clicked right away. We were just two individuals enjoying one another's company and enjoying life's small joys. Being with someone who recognizes the value of sincerity and doesn't require the glitz of luxury to feel important is refreshing. I've learned from this turn of events that life often comes full circle. I've endured betrayals, persevered through many hardships, and come out stronger. Meeting Jack and seeing Cannon's demise has been part of this fantastic trip. It feels as though I've turned the page on a sad chapter and began on a new one, overflowing with optimism and true pleasure. I'm Story 3. As a 35-year-old auditor for a major corporation, I take great satisfaction in being thorough and well-organized. My name is Chloe. I benefit from my excellent attention to detail in both my personal and professional life. My friends frequently make fun of my passion for the company, particularly when it comes to money-related issues like keeping track of receipts and filing taxes on time. However, I believe that these routines are necessary to keep my life in order. Let me now tell you how I got to know Theodore, my husband. It happened during a party that our mutual friend Victoria was throwing. That night, while sipping wine and chatting with pals from college, Theodore showed up. He had a charming grin, was a little older, and exuded confidence. He was a manager at a firm that sold groceries. "Hey, I'm Theodore. Would it be okay if I joined you?" he inquired, eye contact and a beer in hand. "Yes. My name is Chloe. It's good to meet you." I smiled in response. We clicked right away and discovered that we both like hiking and classic rock. Theodore invited me to his sister Audrey's house for a cookout a few months into our relationship. I had never met his family before, and while Audrey was very welcoming, her children were a real handful, running around shouting and throwing toys. Theodore appeared unconcerned, delighted by their vigor, even though I was uncomfortable with the chaos, as our bond became stronger. It was on a beautiful hike that Theodore proposed. Perched on a hill overlooking a breathtaking valley, it was a straightforward yet ideal moment. Our wedding was lovely, but it wasn't without its difficulties, especially with Audrey's children, who were still being mischievous. Their antics amused Theodore. After getting married, Theodore and I thought it was time to purchase our own house, while I battled my dissatisfaction in private. One evening after moving out of our rental flat, we had a financial conversation. I felt optimistic about our future and eager to begin this exciting new chapter with our shared love of adventure and organization. Despite the difficulties his family may present from time to time, Theodore and I had to navigate the practical challenges of more completely integrating our lives as we adapted to the realities of purchasing a new house together. We must decide how to split the costs, Chloe. One evening while lounging on the couch at our present location, Theodore commented, "Yes, that is something I have also been considering." I gave a careful response. "I can handle buying the appliances, furnishings, and a few decorative artworks. How do you feel, Theodore?" The person who always gave surprises had a new sort of proposition. "Why don't I get you a new vehicle? Your previous one has been a pain, I know." He smiled thoughtfully and offered. I was thrilled with the concept. The idea of a trustworthy replacement was really appreciated because my automobile was nearing the end of its useful life. After a few weeks of enthusiastic house shopping, we fell in love with a delightful, if rather pricey home. We concluded that the investment was worthwhile. Although moving in was hectic, I found decorating our new place to be an interesting challenge. I spent a lot of time choosing fashionable, well-made equipment and furnishings. Theodore surprised me with a brand new svelte automobile shortly after I had moved in. "This is amazing, Theodore. Many thanks." I held him and cried out in a state of overwhelming appreciation. Our new house was a lovely place to start. Both of us were successful in our work and loved spending time in the comfortable space we had made. Not everything, though, was flawless. I used to like Theodore's easygoing demeanor, but it started to get on my nerves, especially when it came to domestic duties. After a long day, I asked him to assist me wash the dishes one evening. "I had a difficult day, Chloe. Is tomorrow a good day to do this?" His eyes begged for forgiveness as he answered. However, I insisted on keeping our house tidy, and he grudgingly consented to assist. After a few months of marriage, I started to fear that I wouldn't be able to conceive. Despite the physician's advice, it was difficult to avoid feeling nervous because it was an additional stressor. Audrey, a sister of Theodore who resided in a neighboring state, frequently visited, adding to the turmoil. She would constantly vent to me about her marriage issues whenever she was free. "You won't believe David's actions this time, Chloe," she would begin, clearly frustrated. Audrey continued on venting, so I tried to shift the conversation in the hopes of getting a respite from the never-ending drama. Her children were equally unruly. During their visits, they ran around, fought, and basically made our house a circus. All I needed was some tranquility after a demanding work week. But with the pandemonium they brought, that didn't seem conceivable. "Calm down, guys." In an attempt to bring some order back, I would beg, "Chloe, why are you so stiff all the time?" The tension would increase when Audrey retaliated. Theodore and I managed to manage our lives together in spite of these obstacles, striking a balance between the pleasures of our new house and the intricacies of family relationships and individual aspirations. Our foundation was solid, based on love, common goals, and an ever-growing dedication to one another, despite the sporadic tensions. Audrey's kids were always creating a mess, so I would beg them to behave. "Audrey?" I had just finished cleaning the house, but I was becoming impatient. Audrey once snapped back at me when I told her how frustrated I was. "Perhaps you would understand if you had children." I was greatly affected by what she said. Not only were they unforgiving, but she was also aware of my infertility issues. I was shocked that Theodore watched in silence, since it felt like a direct assault. "Will you allow her to talk like way to me, Theodore?" My voice quivered with a mixture of hurt and rage as I asked. I was disappointed when Theodore brushed my worries aside. "Calm down, Chloe. You're exaggerating the situation." Taking Audrey's side once more, he remarked, "It's not insignificant. In our house, she made fun of me." I cried out, tears welling up in my eyes. I was at my breaking point. I'm sick of my spouse constantly siding with his sister and being treated disrespectfully in my own house. I was aware that something had to change. Audrey showed up out of the blue on Saturday with her children in tow, saying she wanted a break and was going shopping. "Okay, Audrey, but hurry up." With a tone full of tension, I spoke. After thanking me, she hurried out, leaving me with the children and an increasing feeling of dread. I was attempting to make dinner in the kitchen, which is something I like to do very carefully. But it was hard to focus with the children wreaking mayhem. They were rushing about, shouting, and generally causing chaos. "Could you all just keep it down?" In an attempt to find some quiet, I yelled out from the kitchen. They ignored me, and soon after, a loud crash from the living room had me hurrying in there. My grandfather's broken antique Chinese vase was among the rubble. When I looked at the damage, my heart fell. "How in the heck did this happen?" I insisted. As I gazed at the children, who were now motionless with guilty expressions on their faces, my voice began to tremble. "We were only having fun." Without looking at me, one muttered, "This vase is really valuable. It was my grandfather's property. Are you aware of what you have done?" I was furious. My entire body shook with rage. At that moment, Theodore entered. He was calm and uninformed. "What's happening?" he inquired. I pointed to the smashed vase. "My grandfather's vase was just broken by your nephew. Take a look at this disaster." Theodore's reaction just made matters worse. "Relax. Chloe, it's only a vase. We can repair it?" he murmured, brushing off my emotions. "Theodore, it's not just about the vase. Respect is at issue. I've had enough of this. Our house becomes a disaster every time Audrey visits. You also don't appear to give a damn." My voice cracked with fury as I yelled. Audrey was irritated by the noise when she entered at that very time, carrying shopping bags. "Why is everyone shouting?" she inquired. I gestured at the vase's remains on the ground. "My grandfather's face was broken by your children. Look at this mess, Audrey." She said, "Well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them," rather than offering an apology. "Chloe, do you mean me?" "Audrey, they're your kids. Watching them shouldn't be required of me," I answered, feeling very irate. With a frustrated expression, Theodore simply shook his head. "Chloe, you're overreacting. Simply let it go." "Oh," he said. I had had enough. Going overboard. This is plenty for me. I'm fed up with being ignored in my own household, I remarked, at last asserting my own rights, resolved to change. I realized that something had to go for the sake of my happiness and dignity, since the disrespect had gotten to be too much. Audrey had a smile that appeared to proclaim triumph, and Theodore was simply standing there, mute and unresponsive, while I yelled, tears streaming down my face. I walked out of the room, dealing with Audrey and her children's pandemonium, overwhelmed by a mixture of fury, hurt, and betrayal. For months, visits had been draining, but I wasn't ready for what was about to happen. Theodore quietly dropped a bombshell while eating toast at the kitchen table one morning. He did it as casually as if he were making a weather-related remark. "I have something to tell you, Chloe." He said that Audrey was getting divorced and would be spending a few months living with us and the kids. I almost spilled my coffee. "Are you serious? When they come for a day, our house is already a madhouse. How are we going to deal with them spending months here?" I asked incredulously. "She's Chloe, my sister. She needs our assistance." He said, "You need to be more understanding," with a look that suggested I was being unreasonable. He knew I had just been accommodating, but this was too much. "Why can't we find her a place to stay close by? Even the first month's rent will be covered by me," I proposed, attempting to remain calm. "No, this is a better place for her. You may also keep things tidy and assist with the children," as though that were the most obvious answer, he said. "Theodore, I'm not a babysitter. I have to unwind when I get home from work," I protested, growing increasingly irritated. "Chloe, stop being so self-centered. Family is involved. We are necessary to them." His tone sharpened as he retorted, "Theodore, I'm not being self-centered. All I'm requesting is a sensible resolution. I refuse to allow my life to be completely upended," I responded, feeling my fury build. He got up and walked out of the kitchen saying, "Well, you better get used to the idea, because they're coming tomorrow evening." I felt completely deceived and caught off guard. Still enraged from our dispute, I got ready for work the following morning and went to get my vehicle keys, but when I phoned Theodore, they were missing. His tone seemed eerily serene. I took the vehicle. I own it. Do you recall? Audrey will use it for the children, so I'm giving it to her. He told me. Audrey is getting my automobile from you. Are you serious now? I was taken aback. Chloe, it's not your automobile. She needs it more than you do, and I paid for it. He gave a matter-of-fact response. The final straw was that, Theodore, I'm done because you took everything away from me. My voice trembled with rage as I spoke. What are you discussing? Chloe, don't be so emotional. He brushed it off. You obviously don't understand how deeply I feel. I'm holding my phone in the hallway. I was unable to awaken from what felt like a nightmare. How had the situation deteriorated? Determined. I gave a moving firm a call. Hi. To move some appliances and furniture today, I need a crew. It's critical, I asked. A few hours later, the movers showed up, and I showed them the house and the things that needed to be transported. Take it all. Chandeliers, couches, and beds, including the bathroom faucets. When the home started to get deserted, as I watched each piece being performed, I felt a peculiar sensation of relaxation. Now that the home was empty, I sent the movers to my mother's place, eager to start anew away from the chaos that had consumed my life. I thanked the movers for their timely job and left them a gratuity. After gathering my necessities, I went to my mother's house. My phone began to vibrate non-stop after a few hours. I ignored the calls, even if they were from Theodore. Anxiety and a sense of empowerment are mixed together. There was a loud knock at my mom's business that night. Theodore was standing there when I opened it. He looked angry. Chloe, what the devil? What did you do? He stormed into the living area and roared. I took my belongings. Theodore, did you take the vehicle? I took what I had purchased. Keeping my cool, I responded. This is crazy. The home was stripped naked by you. Where? It is time for Audrey and the children to go to bed. He yelled. Anger made his cheeks flush. Theodore, that's your issue. This mess is your fault. I shot back. Now you deal with it. I folded my arms. Chloe, you are a thief. Everything was stolen by you. He made frantic gestures as he accused. There was nothing that I stole. The receipts are here. Calmly, I pulled out a folder and showed him the invoices for all the equipment and furnishings. He turned the receipts over. He became frustrated instead of angry. All right, he said. I'll file for divorce if this is how you want to play it, Chloe. I gave him a stack of papers after taking a deep breath. Completed already. The divorce documents are here, I said. Sign them and we're done. His face became white as he studied the documents. Aren't you taking this very seriously? Theodore, you're dead serious. I'm worthy of better. I confirmed, experiencing a strange wave of serenity. Without saying another word, he signed the documents with a pen he took out of his pocket and returned them to me. All right, Chloe, get what you want. He turned and left my mom's house, and I watched him go. The door behind him slammed. For a while I stood there feeling both relieved and depressed. I felt in my heart that it was the right choice, and it was over. I sat down with my mother that evening and told her everything that had transpired. She concurred that I had made the proper decision and was really encouraging. You've gone through a lot, Chloe. It's time to put your pleasure and well-being first, she remarked, embracing me reassuringly. Thank you, Mother. All I need is a little time to sort things out. I responded as though a heavy burden had been removed. I started getting used to a new schedule over the course of the following several days, arranging my new area at my mother's house and making plans for the future. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long while, I felt positive about the future. Although I was aware that the path ahead would not be simple, I was prepared to meet it head-on. There was no going back now that I had taken back my life. Theodore and I divided the earnings from the sale of our house following the divorce. I made the decision to get some privacy. My mom and I were sitting in the kitchen one afternoon when I used my laptop to browse apartment postings. I think I've discovered the ideal spot, Mom. It's a tiny flat near the workplace in the heart of the city, I remarked, displaying the images to her. She grinned as she peered over my shoulder. Chloe, it looks good. Have you already given the realtor a call? Not yet, I said. prepared to move forward with creating my new life. Okay, I'm going to do this now. With a flutter of joy in my gut, I thought to myself. After picking up my phone, I rang the number and excitedly awaited the realtor's response. A kind voice answered after a few rings. Hi there, I'm Ethan. How may I help you now? Hello, Ethan. I'm Chloe. I came across your ad for the flat in the heart of town. Is it still accessible? I inquired. I crossed my fingers beneath the table. It's still available for purchase, yes. Are you interested in seeing it? There was optimism in Ethan's voice. That would be ideal. What about tomorrow afternoon? I made an effort to speak steadily. For me, that works. Let's get together at 4 p.m., Ethan attested. After we hung up, I was in downtown the next day, eager to meet Ethan and check out the place. He stood outside the structure. His grin was warm and inviting. Hello, Chloe. It's a pleasure to meet you. Let's go on a tour. Shaking his hand, he said, with a spacious living area, a tidy kitchen, and a little balcony that provided a lovely view of the city skyline, the apartment was attractive despite its modest size. This location is perfect. Ethan, I'll take it, I declared. There was a surge of relief. I started organizing my relocation after obtaining the keys and signing the lease. Packing at my mom's house and arranging with movers for the hard lifting took up the following few days. My mom and a few of friends helped us carry the final box into the truck on a moving day. Starting a new Chloe made me feel both nervous and excited. For you, this is a fantastic new beginning. With a reassuring embrace, my mother murmured, Thank you, Mother. I can't wait to claim this home as my own. I smiled in response. With everyone's assistance, we swiftly unloaded and organized everything after our drive to my new flat. I felt happy and pleased as I surveyed my new house. I was prepared to rejoice that night, since it marked the beginning of something fresh. I invited my parents and friends over for supper. While eating pizza and giggling at Chloe's new experience, we sat on the floor surrounded by boxes. Victoria, one of my friends, raised her soda and toasted. Many thanks to all of you. Thank you so much for all of the support, I added. Thank you for your assistance. We laughed and exchanged stories as the evening wore on, and I felt truly joyful for the first time in a long time. I later thought back on my adventure and how far I'd come while sitting on my balcony and admiring the city lights. Having taken charge of my life, I was proud of myself. Friends had told me that my ex-boyfriend, Theodore, had used a portion of our mutual assets to purchase a modest flat. Audrey and her 3 children now lived there with him. Juggling 3 jobs to make ends meet while they battled ongoing arguments. Suddenly, one day, Theodore phoned. I was taken aback when I saw his name flash on my phone screen, but my curiosity won out. Hi, Theodore. What's up? In a neutral tone, I inquired. Just listen to me, Chloe. His voice was frantic as he started. I apologize for everything. I know I made a mistake. As I listened, I became aware of how much I had changed and how my life was now full of fresh starts and constructive moves forward. It wasn't until now that I realized how much you struggled. As I saw Audrey's children, I couldn't help but laugh a little. Theodore. Really, it's taken you this long to comprehend? Incredulously, I asked. I'm honest. Even though I realize it's late, I have reflected a great deal. I also miss you. We are missed. Can we begin anew? He said. I'm willing to move into your place and make things right. He spoke with a serious tone. I shook my head incredulously and chuckled. You can't be serious, Theodore. Do you believe that you can simply return to my life as if nothing had occurred? I mean it, Chloe. I'll go to any lengths, even take on more work to make things right. With a hint of urgency in his voice, he went on. I've moved on, Theodore. I'm happy now, and I don't want to go through that chaos again. I gave a forceful response. Chloe, hurry up. This time we can make it work. I've evolved, he continued. I sighed in sympathy and annoyance. Theodore, it's finished. You must prioritize your family and your own life. I don't want to go back to that mess. Please, Chloe, I ask you. He begged. His voice broke. Theodore? No. Without you, I've discovered serenity, and I won't give that up. I stood my position and made an assertion. Be careful. Theodore, I wish you luck in finding your way." As I hung up, I had a mixture of relief and closure. Theodore was clearly having difficulties, but I couldn't allow his problems to drag me back into a predicament from which I had carefully escaped. I told Victoria the news when we had coffee later that day. "You'll be shocked to learn who called me today." I rolled my eyes as I spoke. "Who?" Victoria asked, raising an eyebrow. "Theodore. He pleaded with me to let him return and live in my flat." I shook my head and repeated. Victoria almost choked on her coffee as she erupted in laughter. "Are you serious? What were you saying?" Naturally, I did not tell him. I smiled and said, "I'm not going back to that mess." We spoke and laughed all afternoon, and I was amazed at how far I had come. I had created a peaceful, contented new life for myself. I wasn't going to let anyone ruin it. I had a deep feeling of satisfaction and closure as I made my way home. That chapter of my life had finally come to an end, ready to move forth with joy and confidence.